For years, France walked with the confidence of an empire, its wealth shining brightly in global affairs. But behind the shimmering surface, something was festering. A quiet storm had been brewing in Africa, an awakening, a rebellion not of guns but of economic sovereignty. And now, the consequences have arrived like a thunderclap. France, once a colonial titan, is drowning in debt, $3.8 trillion and counting, rising by thousands of dollars every second. And many are beginning to ask a dangerous question. Did Africa's rejection of French influence trigger the fall of a Western power? In the streets of South Africa, tensions are boiling again. Land remains a battlefield, one drenched not in blood this time, but in history and bitter memory. A white South African man, face stern and voice cold, warns that any attempt to reclaim land without compensation would lead to civil war. The threat isn't just rhetoric, it's a reminder of the unresolved wounds that apartheid and colonization left behind. But Julius Malema, never one to bow his head, fires back. He tells of his own farm, taken not by settlers, but by the ruling ANC and handed over to another white man. Villages nearby remain without electricity, while white-owned farms shine with lights and flush with privilege. His question pierces the silence. When land was stolen from the indigenous, who compensated them? While South Africa wrestles with land and legacy, a bigger shift is shaking the world. Africa's new alliance, this bloc, has shown France the door. From Mali to Niger, from Burkina Faso to Guinea, one by one, the solemn nations have declared, no more military interference, no more economic chains, no more CFA franc. These weren't empty gestures, these were fatal blows to France's silent empire. And now, the empire is falling. France has lost access to untold billions in raw resources, gold, uranium, oil that once flowed freely from African soil into European coffers. They no longer control the financial systems in West Africa that guaranteed decades of extraction and profit. Worse, France is now pleading for help from America, from the EU, desperate to stop its financial bleeding. Some analysts are calling it a third world descent, and others warn that without African wealth, France may not survive the next decade as a global power. But this collapse didn't happen overnight. African intellectuals, revolutionaries, and leaders have long warned the West, you're not lifting us, you're living off us. That truth, once dismissed as radical rhetoric, is now echoing in European boardrooms and policy circles. The numbers don't lie, the timing is too sharp to ignore. France's debt crisis and Africa's exit are no coincidence, they are cause and effect. And as the cracks spread, a new question rises from the ashes. What if Africa's liberation was never just a moral battle but an economic reckoning waiting to happen? They carved up Sudan, they broke its back into pieces and called it peace. Djibouti, once a strategic outpost, became a pawn in the global power game. Somalia, already bleeding from decades of conflict, is now being whispered about. Another partition on the horizon, another nation reduced to fragments. Libya, once a strong and sovereign state, now lies in chaos, ravaged by foreign bombs and backdoor deals. The map of Africa is being redrawn not by Africans, but by those who fear a united, self-determined Africa. The pattern is clear. When an African country dares to rise, to stand tall, to resist the puppet strings, it is swiftly turned into a battlefield of humanitarian intervention. The message is loud, African unity is a threat, and that leads US to the question few dare to ask: what is it about Africa's potential that terrifies the global elite? Could it be the mineral wealth, the youth, the fertile land, or maybe, just maybe, it's the fear that if Africa unites, it will no longer beg at the doors of Europe and America, it will stand beside them as an equal. So, instead, division is the weapon of choice. Divide the people, fuel the tribal lines, distort the truth, keep them distracted, while the real power play happens behind closed doors. In the midst of this, another controversy has erupted, this time from the UK. A British politician of Nigerian descent, Kemi Badenoch, recently claimed on international TV that Nigerian women cannot pass on citizenship to their children. Her statement ignited outrage, and for good reason. She framed Nigeria as a misogynistic, backward state, but the facts told a different story. Many were quick to point out the obvious. The Nigerian constitution, written in English, accessible to anyone, makes no distinction between mother or father when it comes to conferring citizenship. It clearly states that any child born to a Nigerian parent, whether male or female, is entitled to Nigerian citizenship by birth. Simple, clear, undeniable. But Bedenik either didn't know this or chose to ignore it. And that's the most dangerous kind of misinformation, the kind wrapped in credentials and broadcast on global platforms like CNN. Critics didn't hold back. They called her out for using her heritage as a political tool, while simultaneously degrading the very country that gave her identity. Some called it self-hate, others saw it as opportunism. But one thing was certain: her narrative played perfectly into the hands of those who benefit from painting Africa as dysfunctional. Her words weren't just false, they were damaging. They reinforced every tired stereotype about Nigeria, and by extension, the continent itself. And yet, her actions beg a deeper question. Why do some Africans, once they step onto foreign soil, turn their backs on their homeland? Why does success abroad, for some, come at the cost of truth? Shouldn't those who've made it be the loudest champions for Africa's progress, not its loudest critics? This is the problem we face: not just external sabotage, but internal betrayal. The battle for Africa's future is being fought, not only in deserts and boardrooms, but in narratives, in the media, in the hearts of Africans everywhere. And if we don't speak up, if we don't challenge the lies, then we risk allowing others to define who we are. So, as we close this report, we remind you this is not about hate, nor about division. This is about truth, about accountability, about protecting Africa from false narratives and ensuring her story is told by her people. If this resonated with you, support our work. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the African News Channel. Your super thanks and memberships fuel our mission to speak fearlessly and amplify African voices. We're not here to please outsiders, we're here to reclaim our dignity. The world may not be ready for a united Africa, but Africa is. They say Africa is poor, but how do you call a continent poor when its soil produces the gold that backs European banks, the oil that fuels global economies, and the cobalt that powers your iPhones and Teslas? The truth is simple: Africa is not poor, it's being looted in broad daylight. The so-called developed nations have built their wealth by systematically extracting Africa's resources for centuries, from Niger's uranium lighting up French homes while its own children live in darkness, to Congo's rare minerals filling Western tech while its people remain in poverty. This isn't a coincidence. It's a structure, a machine, and that machine is now breaking down because Africa is pulling the plug. But the empire doesn't die quietly. When African nations start taking back control, the West doesn't just lose money, it loses power. That's why they use media as a weapon. When African nations say no to neocolonial control, headlines scream chaos, military junta, instability. But they never ask, why is it that the moment a country rejects foreign domination, the world calls it a threat? Thomas Sankara, Gaddafi, Lumumba, they didn't die because they were evil. They died because they were independent. And now, a new generation is rising, young, fearless, and unwilling to sell their future. Look around. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré and Assimi Goïta are not puppets. They are symbols. They represent a shift of fire spreading across Africa. They are not waiting for approval from Paris or Washington. They are listening to the cries of their people. They are tearing down the systems that kept Africa chained to outdated pacts and fake diplomacy. These are not rebels. These are reformers. They are not breaking the rules, they're breaking the silence. To the West, this is a wake-up call. Africa is not yours to manage, manipulate, or mold. The time of backroom deals and economic blackmail is ending. If you continue to ignore the new Africa, you will lose it completely. Because this generation is not asking for respect, it is demanding it. And to the African diaspora, this is not the time to mock your homeland for clout. This is not the time to distance yourself just to appear acceptable abroad. Africa doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be proud, to stand up, to speak truth. You don't have to live on the continent to fight for her dignity. But you must stop selling her out just to fit in. Africa is standing at a crossroads. But unlike the past, this time she is choosing the path herself. No longer guided by the hand of the colonizer. No longer shaped by IMF scripts or UN talking points. Africa will rise not because the world allowed it, but because her people refused to stay down. So if this message speaks to you, like this video, share it boldly, and subscribe to the Africa News channel. Your voice matters, your support fuels. Fearless journalism. This is not just content, it's a movement. The world may still try to silence Africa, but we're done whispering.